I'm Jessica.
And today we are here with our August wrap-up. You can call it a flop. You can call it a success. I'm not really sure how I feel yet about everything I read, which was small. That's okay.
I think this is like the least amount of books we've read a month this year.
Yeah, which is... In Washington, school doesn't start till September, so I don't have the excuse of school. I have the excuse of nothing was hitting.
Yeah, but I think...
Nothing was hitting.
I think, too, we were, like, trying to pack in all the last-minute summer things.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of busy.
We don't need to explain ourselves.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's fine.
And you know what? I read a lot of books I like, which is better than a lot of books I didn't like. You know, a few really good ones. Okay, first up we have Curses and Other Buried Things by Caroline George, and this is a digital ARC I was given by NetGalley, which releases October 10th, and this book was so good. It's set in the Georgia swamps, and we have a dual timeline. We follow Susanna. There's family curses, generational curses, and she's the first one to experience, and then we follow the most recent girl who is present day time. So we go back and forth seeing like why the curse started, and then she's trying to break it. So it like happens the day you turn 18. First you start sleepwalking into the swamp, then you have insomnia and can't sleep because of your sleepwalking, and then you go mentally insane. So it's like she knows kind of the countdown in her head, and she has to break the curse before it breaks her, essentially. And it was just so good. There was lots of second chance relationships because she tries to push everyone away because she thinks she's just going to die anyways. So it was really good. Perfect summer to fall transition. So I'm sad that this isn't out yet, so you can't read it, but you still should because the spooky vibes are there for sure.
And you read another book by her, right?
Mm-hmm. It's called The Summer We Forgot, which is a murder mystery set in Florida.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now, because it's in kind of seaside area.
It's in seaside.
Oh. Okay, the first book I read, I don't have a physical copy of because I got it from the library, but that is The Spectacular by Fiona Davis. And I think this was a Book of the Month choice in July. I'm not sure. But this book really intrigued me because it's a historical fiction, but it's about, I feel like, a period of time that isn't often explored in historical fiction. So this is set in New York City, Manhattan area in the 1950s. And this book follows a young girl, she's like in her early 20s, named Marion. And she is, at the beginning of the story, a dance teacher. And her father doesn't really like the idea of her having any sort of career in the dance world because he thinks that she just needs to get married and have a family because that was, you know, the stereotypical thing to do as a woman in the 1950s. You didn't have a career, you just stayed home and had kids and took care of the house. So she's like constantly at odds with him, because she wants to pursue dance because she loves dance, but he doesn't want her to. And so at the very beginning of the book, she gets fired from her job as a dance teacher because she teaches kids, and she tries to make it fun for them instead of just like being rigid and strict. And so that actually ends up getting her fired. So she decides to, on a whim and in secret from her father, audition for the Rockettes because the Rockettes were like up and coming during this time. And so she surprisingly makes it. She wasn't expecting to, but she did. And so it's kind of the story of her pursuit of being a Rockette, her trying to get her father to understand that she doesn't want to give up dancing just because he doesn't want her to. She can still like get married and have a family and do both. But it also has a side story of a bomber that is going around the New York City, Manhattan area, bombing like various places, and they can't catch him. So the bomber ends up bombing the Radio City Music Hall while she's performing. And so she kind of ends up, like, because that happens while she's there, she witnesses who the person was that was leaving the bomb. She finds herself kind of tangled up in the investigation of trying to stop this Unabomber. So it was a really interesting, I would say it was pretty fast paced. It had a lot of elements kind of intertwined. And so it was not a slow, typical historical fiction. So I really liked this book. I don't really want to give... Did you say how many stars you gave that book? Do we have to say stars? Because when I'm finished with a book, I rarely immediately rate it unless it's like an immediate 5 stars. But I don't know. If I was giving stars, I guess I would say this would be like a 4-star read for me. So.
Okay. My next book, I don't even know how to explain this. It's One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake, and I read this because Haley Pham read it. That's it. And because my boyfriend took me to the bookstore and was like, pick what you want. And obviously I'm going to pick an author I've never read before if it's my money that's not at stake. And I really liked this book, but I also didn't, and I don't know why. I wish I could go back and reread it right now because I was in a major reading slump until like last week. And so I don't know if the things that were bothering me was poor execution or if I just wasn't feeling reading. Because the story was very interesting. It follows 2 families. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and this takes place in New York City, present day. And they're like rival witch families. They sell potions and stuff. But they're not like love potions, but like almost drugs.
Oh.
And it's pretty dark, but it's very good as far as like the storyline goes. It was a little slow. I enjoyed the slow burn of the romance, but the story itself, the plot, it was a little slow, which I feel like maybe I would have enjoyed more if I hadn't been in a reading slump because I do really like her writing. So overall, I don't know what to give this, but if you like dark academia vibes, if you like mafia vibes, if you need another Romeo and Juliet retelling, I suggest this.
Okay, well, let's see. After I finished The Spectacular, I picked up Jade City, and I read probably like 20 pages of it, and it just was, maybe more than that actually, more like 30. But it just was not driving with me. I found that there were way too many names in this book, which I've actually heard Carrie Kinnery talk about. And they have like, each character has multiple names. So they have like this very long Chinese name. And then they sometimes call them by their first name, sometimes by their middle name. So you never really know who they're talking about. Anyways. So I ended up DNFing that. I don't know if I'll pick it back up. But I just was really in the mood for, like, a vampire, you know, kind of, like, dark gothic book. So I picked up The Beautiful by Renee something. I don't know how to say her last name. But this book follows a girl named Celine. This book takes place in, like, the 1800s. And she was a dressmaker, like a pretty well-known dressmaker, or she like apprenticed for a well-known dressmaker, I guess, in Paris. And then something ends up happening to her in Paris, and so she feels like she needs to flee Paris and kind of start over. So she comes to New Orleans, and she decides to live at this convent because she has like no friends, no family, and so she decides to move to this convent that basically allows young women who aren't married, don't really have a career, to come and stay and work at the convent for like their room and board. And so she does that, and then one day she's at this market because, like, part of their job is to sell things to, like, fundraise for the convent, kind of. And so she's at this market working at this booth, and this girl comes up to her, and she's, like, talking to her about dresses or something, and it ends up in conversation that this girl finds out that Celine is a dressmaker, and she's like, oh my gosh, you have to make a dress for me for this masquerade ball I'm going to. And so she decides to do that, but in doing that and meeting with this girl, she finds herself in the middle of this, like, club. Like, this girl is part of this club called, I think it's called, like, the Court of the Lions. And everyone that's in this club is kind of, like, not normal. They have some kind of, like, supernatural ability, or they're not completely human. And so she meets this guy named Sebastian, who they call Bastion instead. I don't know why. But they kind of, like, have a, not enemies to lovers, I would say, but, like, he agitates her, and so she, like, is annoyed with him, but she finds him attractive, so she's, like, in a struggle over that. But in the middle of all this, there's a serial killer on the loose who is killing people by draining their bodies of blood. And so she's not caught up in that, but she's, like, are the Court of Lions responsible? Do they have anything to do with this? Like, do they know who this person is and they're just keeping it from the police? And so she's kind of, like, tangled up in this web of, like, do I trust them? Do I not? Are they out to kill me? Are they not? But she is, like, very attracted to Sebastian. So this is kind of like a Jack the Ripper-esque story. But there's, like, definitely some politics within the Court of Lions that's interesting. Just kind of, like, the setting that it takes place is totally gothic and gives, like, Halloween spooky vibes. So this is a series. I think there's 3. So I'll definitely be picking up the second one. I'm not, like, in a crazy hurry to start it, but I will be finishing it probably sometime this fall. So I don't know. This book is a little slow-paced. The romance is definitely a slow burn. I don't know if it, continues on throughout the series, but I liked this. It wasn't, like, amazing, but it was good for what I needed at the time. So I would say I would give this, like, 3.5 stars.
Okay, my next book is also a vampire book.
It is? Oh,
and
yeah.
that is Vampire Hearts and Other Dead Things by Margie Fuston. And I don't really know what made me want to read this other than I wanted something fall, and I thought, hey, maybe a contemporary will get me out of my slump. It didn't. But that's okay because something else did. And we follow Victoria, whose father is dying, and she grew up watching vampire movies, vampire shows, reading books, reading about them online, about vampires, with her dad. And so she decides she's going to go to New Orleans and find a vampire to save her dad.
Oh.
And that's the story. And along with her is her kind of ex-best friend, Henry. And the best part about this book, hands down, was just the New Orleans description.
Oh, that's so weird that we both read New Orleans books. We didn't
They're
even
both
know
vampire
it.
books. So.
Yeah.
But it made me, like, really want to go there, which I feel like is how you know something was written well, if you want to go somewhere that's real. Like, to me, obviously, I want to go to Terrason from Throne of Glass because it's not real, but the descriptions of New Orleans and knowing that I can actually physically go to that place made me want to read it more. This book was definitely cringy, though, at times. And it's one of those books where you're like, was this on purpose? Like, did she just have a really good time writing this and, like, didn't take it too seriously? Or was it supposed to be, like, super serious and I just found it funny and that's my fault? I don't know. Either way, I enjoyed it. It's kind of weird, though, because this girl is just, like, trying to find these vampires, and meanwhile, you know, her dad is just, like, has days left at home, and I'm like, I feel like you should just be with him.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird. But also, she was, like, at the same time, making her grief her entire personality, and, like, her friend that had to take her there, like, wanted to have fun, but she wouldn't do anything with him. But if you're sad, just be with your dad. So, I didn't really like the main character. But that's okay. Because the vibes were good. And her best friend was great. So, 3 stars, I guess. It pushed me out of my reading stuff a little more. Just not completely.
A nudge.
Mm-hmm.
An aggressive nudge, maybe. Okay. This book I picked up was on my TBR. My jar TBR. Jar chooses my TBR. Can it be you? And that is The Lost Melody by Joanna Davidson Politano. And this book was such a vibe. Actually, I'm realizing now every book I read this month was historical in some way. But this book is set in the Victorian era, and it follows our main character, Vivian, who is a concert pianist. Like, her whole life has been devoted to the piano and performance, and her dad, like, in his pursuit of kind of making her famous, is very abusive, like, physically to her, mentally, emotionally, all those things. So, kind of trigger warnings for that. But at the very beginning of the book, he passes away, and she finds out in the reading of his will that he has a lot of debt, but he also has been sending money monthly for, like, ever to this asylum, because he has a ward at this asylum that he never talked about. And so she's like, this is weird, like, why does he have this ward? Why is he sending monthly to this asylum to take care of this person? He's never talked about that to me. And so she's kind of like at a crossroads of, am I just going to keep paying it, not know who this person is? Am I going to cut them off? And then she's kind of like, what is my life going to be like now that my dad's not around? Am I going to, like, still pursue being a concert pianist? And so she decides, mind you, she lives like she lives a life of privilege, but she just decides, like, she's going to go work at this asylum to discover who this ward is. And so I don't know, I can't say much, because there's, like, something major that happens that changes the trajectory of this whole story, but this book took, like, a major twist that I did not see coming. So, like, what happens to her while she's working at this ward kind of, like, takes the story from this to, like, this real fast. And I don't want to say what it is, because it's kind of a plot twist, but the whole story is uncovering, 1, who this ward is, 2, why her dad kept it a secret, and then it's also, like, peeling back the layers of this asylum, which, like, I guess back then, anyone could become committed just because, like, they're homeless. Like, they could be committed at an asylum just because they're homeless, or they have, like, postpartum depression, or just, like, the most bizarre reasons you could be now committed at this asylum for the rest of your life. And so I would say, like, there's trigger warnings for mental health, like, if that's something that you struggle with. There is a patient in this book who suffers with postpartum depression, and her story is very sad, so maybe if you're struggling with that, don't read this. But it was just very well done. She is a Christian author, so there are, like, Christian aspects sprinkled throughout this book that Vivian clings to, like, help her during all of this. But I really, really enjoyed this. It was very unique. It was, like, creepy and spooky, but without being, like, demonic or like The Exorcist.
paranormal.
Yeah, there was no like. There's hints of things that like makes you think like, could this possibly be paranormal? But everything ends up having an explanation, kind of like Scooby-Doo. So I don't know. I just really enjoyed this. I will be picking up more of her books for sure. I would say this was like almost a 5-star, but not quite. So I would say like 4.5.
Okay. Behold the book that finally got me out of my slump. I've had this book for like
A while.
an embarrassing amount of time. I think I got it last fall.
Well, that's not that long.
It's still embarrassing because I wanted to read it for so long, and I wanted to read it before I bought it, and then I saw it for cheap, and I was like, I have to have it, and then I still didn't read it. So that is obviously Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and this is a dual timeline book as well. So we follow, first and foremost, the Ellingham case, and we follow multiple POVs throughout that. There's FBI interviews that we read, there's letters, transcripts, and then there's also just normal dialogue description format. And so this is about a private school in Vermont. It's very secluded, and one day the owner of the school's wife and daughter are kidnapped. And he receives this extremely disturbing letter, and right before this, another little girl at the school was kidnapped. And they don't know what happened, and this is a cold case. It was never solved. They just were like, oh well. So then we follow Stevie, who is now attending Ellingham Academy, present day, and she decides it's her time to shine. She's gonna solve this case. But then some of her classmates start dying too. So, is our murderer truly devious back? Is this someone posing as him? What's going on? Is this connected to the Ellingham case? There's so many things going on. This book is a fever dream. It's just like, I don't even know how to explain everything that happens because there's so much happening. And the first book, I'd say it was a little slow at the beginning, but once it started, I was like, okay, that was a really good setup. I'm glad we had that. But now I'm on the second one, which I'm going to talk about because I have like 20 pages left and it's the 31st. So I'm going to finish it today. And the second book, The Vanishing Stair, I don't like it as much. It's been very slow, but we're definitely building up right now to what I think is going to be a really good third book, and there's 5.
Oh, wow.
But the fourth one is a standalone, but I'm not sure about the fifth one.
What's the fourth one called?
The Box in the Woods. It takes place at like a summer camp.
Okay.
I don't know what to feel about the second book. Future editing me will give you my official rating, but I don't know how to feel. The beginning was really slow for this ending on such a cliffhanger. And that's all I'll say. So,
Okay.
that's all I got.
Okay. The last book I read this month was a real humdinger. And they say that word in this book, so that's why I said that. But that is the only one left by Riley Sager. This is my first Riley Sager book. This book, like, I'm just sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, man, maybe this is a 5-star. This book was freaking good. Like, how you know a book is good to me is if you think about it, like, after you're done reading it, like, you're like, oh yeah, like, that was real crazy. Anyways, this book follows a girl named Kit, and she is a caretaker for elderly people, or just people who need a caretaker, and she is currently on, like, a suspension, I guess, from this agency that, like, hires her out as a caretaker because, I'll try to say this in a way that isn't a spoiler, she was investigated by the police because they think she might have purposely left medication out so that someone would kill themselves. So, like, manslaughter.
I had literally no idea what this book was about
Yeah.
until you're telling me.
So, she's, like, living with her dad. She has no job, and then like the whole little town that she lives in kind of like is like, oh, you did do that, like we all know it. And so she's kind of like has a bad reputation in this town. But at the beginning of the book, she finally is done with like her suspension from being investigated. They found her like not at fault. And so her boss calls her up and he's like, I have a new job for you. So she goes to his office and he's like, you're gonna go care for Lenora Hope. Now, Lenora Hope is this elderly woman who is infamous in this town because Lenora Hope allegedly killed her dad, mom, and sister, and she lives up on this hill, like cliff top over the ocean, in this house that's like completely like isolated, yeah. And where she lives is called Hope's End. So this book takes place in the 80s. So the murder took place in like the 40s, maybe? 40, no, longer than that, 20s. Anyways, so the rhyme that the whole town says is, at 17, Lenora Hope hung her sister with a rope, stabbed her father with a knife, took her mother's happy life. It wasn't me, Lenora said, but she's the only one not dead.
I love something about rhymes and murder books really creeps me out.
It is
Truly
creepy.
Devious has one. I keep reading it over and over because I find it so good.
So she like is like, heck no, I'm not going to work there. And he's like, you do this job or you're not working for me anymore. So she's like, oh snap, I guess I have to do it. So she goes to work there, doesn't tell her dad because she has like a really not good relationship with her dad because of what happened with her being investigated with her job and stuff. She doesn't think that he believes that she was innocent. So the previous caretaker didn't show up for work one day. No one knew she was quitting or like planning on leaving or anything. And all of her stuff is still in the room that now Kit has to live in. And so, by the way, Lenora Hope, who she's caring for, is like totally wheelchair bound. She can't speak at all. She's paralyzed except for like, I think it's her left hand. So she can't talk. And so how Kit has to communicate with her is Lenora just taps. Like, one tap means no, two tap means yes, and that's the only way she can communicate with her. Until she discovers that Lenora has a typewriter in her room, and so Lenora, like, tells her on her typewriter that she wants to tell Kit, like, what really happened that night. And so Kit is like, I don't know if I want to know, like, what is this gonna, what does this mean? But, like, she doesn't know if Lenora is going to tell her the truth or not. That's, like, the big kind of, like, conflict she has. Like, is what she tells me even going to be true? But then, like, some weird things start happening. Like, she hears voices in Lenora's room at night. And, like, hears someone walking around in her room. And she's, like, she would, like, open the door really fast and then no one would be there. So she's, like, is Lenora, like, faking me out and she can walk, or is, like, someone sneaking into her room? But the other two people that work there have worked there since Lenora was, like, a teenager and lived in this house. So they, like, stuck by her despite the fact that she was accused. She was never, like, arrested for the murder of her family because they, like, couldn't prove that she did it somehow, which is a little crazy. But they, like, stuck through her and still work there now. And so this whole story is kind of just about, like, Kit trying to uncover what really happened. Also, sidebar, this house is, like, slowly eroding away. So it's, like, literally, like, crumbling apart. Like, the yard is eroding away. Like, it's just... This book is crazy. Like, this is probably the craziest book I've ever read. Like, they're like, oh, there's a new crack in the wall. It's just the house shifting. Oh, the house, like, the side of the house just fell off. No big deal. So, there's just a lot. Like, this book is very spooky, like, very eerie. There's a lot of plot twists in this book. But I will say, trigger warnings for murder. And also, there's some things that happens when it's, like, back in time that are a little triggering to, like, just, like, very descriptive medically. So if that might bother you, maybe don't read this. But okay, I'm gonna say I think this was a 5-star read for me. I really like this. I really want you to read it now. Can you just put that on your TBR? Okay,
Will do.
Take care of her. And like I said, I haven't read anything by Riley Sager before, but you better believe I'm going to now. But I feel like this might be his best work, so.
Probably. I read The House Across the Lake, and I was kind of iffy on it, so. But that was only really because I hated the main character. It wasn't a bad book.
Also, I'll say, in case I didn't explain this, this is like dual timeline. So it does talk about like the present day, which is in the 80s, and then the past when the murders happened and like leading up to that. So you get like to see what's happening now and what you think was happening then. So
I'll read it next, I promise.
yes, please.
Maybe
like
I should pick something.
Please, like now. Please now. Like right now. When this video is over, you can just start it. Okay. And I did pick up the Thursday Murder Club, which was also on my TBR, but I haven't finished that yet. But I am enjoying it. It's pretty comical.
I started The Haunting of Hill House and I haven't finished it, so that's just where I'm at.
So we've got some work to do.
It's not hitting, but I want to finish it.
Yeah.
To see if it does hit later.
That's fair.
Okay.
Okay. That's
Cheers
it.
to being out of a slump.
Yes. Cheers to all the fall vibes and Halloween spooky vibes.
I've never been on such a thriller kick in my life. But
I
just got 2 from the library.
You know what I can, like,
3.
wholeheartedly say? I don't have the urge to read any fantasy right now.
Me either.
Which is crazy. Because that's our go-to
I think my
usually.
brain is just too tired for that.
No world building right now. Just thrills and chills, you know what I'm saying?
Rock on.
Like, it literally says that on this book.
That's cute.
Yeah.
The cover gives me major.
I know. I really like the colors too, like the blue.
Normally, I would hate this.
Yeah, but it works.
Like the Family Game book.
I don't know. The contrast of the blue and the red is really
because
vibing.
It's 80s vibes. Like it's very vibrant, bold. I love it. Okay. Anyways, we're gonna go read now. Now I'm in the mood.
And eat.
Yeah.
I'm starving.
Okay,
bye.